There's tensions there. And so can you explain a little bit about the past there and what's going on and why it matters?
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, India and Pakistan, really are constantly at odds with one another. India is primarily a Hindu nation. Pakistan's primarily an Islamic nation. That's actually why, they were divided into those two different regions to separate them from one another. But there's ongoing conflict. One of the big conflicts is over a region called Kashmir. Each of the nations control part of it, but they each claim to own all of it. And that's actually where this attack on these 26 tourists took place, was in this kind of disputed Kashmir area. But these are two. The reason this is significant, I mean, is there's a lot of reasons, but one reason is these are both nuclear powers. A lot of people may not realize that. There's only about 10 nations in the world with nuclear weapons, and
Hmm.
two of those are India and Pakistan. And of course, these are massive nations. In Pakistan, there's about 250 million people, and of course, India is about 1.5 billion people. So, combined, it's almost 2 billion people on the face of the earth. It's more than 20% of the people on earth. And so these are two massive powers. And what's happening right now is, I mean, I'm continuing to just see things online, but and Reuters just has a headline that just came out, says Pakistan defense minister says military incursion by India is imminent. Newsweek just has a headline that just came out: Pakistan shoots down an Indian drone after a nuclear warning.
Hmm.
And so these two nations, it looks like that it's some kind of response from India is imminent. Pakistan, of course, says they're going to retaliate. Following this terror attack, something that's kind of heightened this is India immediately suspended a very important water treaty that provides a lot of water to people in Pakistan. That obviously is going to be a huge humanitarian concern, going to jeopardize many lives there and create this humanitarian crisis because of this water from the Indus River. And the Pakistani government has warned that messing with that flow of water will be an act of war. So the rhetoric's just going back and forth, from one nation to the other. But it's believed that India is going to respond. Now, China is basically kind of taking Pakistan's side in this. The U.S. hasn't really taken a side, but seems to be a little bit more favorable towards India. So you always worry about in these kind of huge conflagrations like this, two massive nations, that other people can get sucked in and get pulled into this.
Yeah.
But a lot of this too is being aggravated by a lot of fake news and AI stuff that people are putting out there, showing the Indian president in chains, being captured, and showing all these things. So people are trying to sift through what's real and what's not real over there in their country. So with all this misinformation that's happening, it's a real mess. But I think it fits in. The Bible says that as we approach the coming of Jesus, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Here we have two of the largest nations in the world now, basically ready to square off two nuclear powers. And once that happens, once it begins to escalate with the hatred they have for one another and this real history of hatred, there's no guarantee that this will stop anytime soon, and it could escalate very, very, very quickly.
And when you're looking at that as far as end times prophecy, like what are the key, what are sort of the overarching key things you're looking for when conflicts like this arise? What are the sorts of things that kind of perk you up and go, okay, that sounds familiar?
Well, I think in the end times you have alliances. The Bible kind of lays out some different alliances for us. Everything in this world is ultimately headed towards a war. The great war of Armageddon in Revelation chapter 16. It's mentioned in Revelation chapter 19. So this world is headed for a massive final war that will take place in the end times, that will be the nations of the earth invading Israel. But it also mentions, the Bible does, in Revelation chapter 16, it mentions the kings from the east will come into the land of Israel in the end. And we don't really know where these nations are specifically. We know they're east of the Euphrates River, is all we really know. It says they're going to have to come across the Euphrates. It'll be dried up. And so, obviously India, Pakistan, China, a lot of the world's population center really is in that area. And so when I see these kinds of things happening, I always think in terms of these kind of global alliances that the Bible predicts in the end times. And you think about, nations like China and India and Pakistan, these huge nations being involved in a war like that in the end times. That's one of the things I think about. The Bible talks about a northern confederacy of Russia and Iran and Turkey and some other nations. It mentions a Western confederacy, the Antichrist and a European power. Of course, all those directions are from the land of Israel. So I always think about it in terms of that, but just also, the world is going to continue to be in turmoil. There's going to be these wars, these rumors of wars that are taking place as the end gets near. And we just see it on every front. You've got Russia, Ukraine, which is a huge war, all the turmoil in the Middle East with Russia and all of her neighbors, with Israel, with Gaza, and all of the neighbors that are around them. Now you've got the potential for two of these, nuclear powers to face off, Iran, Pakistan and India. So, it's just a constant turmoil and churning in the world that we should expect as we get near the end times.
All right, let's talk about another one of those alliances, Pastor Mark. We saw recently in the last few days, Turkey kind of aligning a bit more with Hamas and even the PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So tell me about what you're seeing there and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, ever since the civil war there in Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who's the ruler in Syria, he was under siege. Mm-hmm. He had Iran came in and moved in, and so did Russia, which they were bolstering the Assad regime, which that was unbelievable when that took place, because the Bible predicts in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that there's going to be a coalition of nations that are going to invade Israel in the end times. And some of the nations are mentioned as Rosh, also mentioned as Persia, which became Iran in 1935. But four of the nations mentioned there are modern day Turkey. You have Meshech, and you have Tubal, and you have Gomer, and you have Togarmah. Those ancient locations were what's in modern day Turkey. So here recently, a group called HTS, a terrorist group, took over Syria. They pushed out Bashar al-Assad. He headed to Moscow. And they took that area over really in a very lightning quick time. But Iran now is basically out of Turkey, because obviously they have their hands full with Israel and what's happening there. Russia now has their hands full with Ukraine, but now Turkey has moved in. And they've kind of almost really become a protectorate, if you will, for Syria. And that they've hooked up here with this HTS group. And so it's interesting. You've got these Gog Magog nations that are going to invade Israel, Russia, Iran, and Turkey being the leading nations. Iran and Russia were there, which looked very significant. They both now have kind of, lessened their influence there, but now Turkey's there. And the leader of Turkey, Erdogan, President Erdogan, he hates Israel. He's been a huge supporter of Hamas. He even threatened at one point during the Israel-Gaza war to invade Israel. There have been massive demonstrations in Turkey against Israel. He's a horrible anti-Semite. And so there he is now, right on Israel's northern border, as Turkey's gaining a lot of influence there. That's why Israel's been hitting a lot of air bases, chemical supply depots, all kinds of things in Syria, because they know that Turkey's moving in there. They've actually created a large buffer zone too up north of Mount Hermon, because they realize the seriousness of having Turkish troops close enough where they could march right into Israel. So this is really significant. You have Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas that are being supported now by Erdogan there in Turkey. So really what's happened now in Syria, we've exchanged Russia and Iran now for Turkey there, of having the powerful influence in that area. And they're going to just continue to support terrorist groups, give them refuge there, to be a continued thorn in the side of Israel. Again, all of this, I think, is just the buildup to someday, at some point in time, when Turkey, Iran, Russia, these nations finally come together in a real galvanized coalition to come into Israel from the north, which is, of course, exactly where Syria is, right on the northern border of Israel. So, a lot of times we talk a lot about Russia, a lot about Iran. Turkey's kind of in the background a little bit, but Turkey's kind of the outlier because they're a NATO nation. as well. So they've kind of been the fly in the ointment of kind of, how will they get involved in this invasion of Israel in the end times? But I think more and more we're seeing how that's going to take place and how they're going to align with these other nations in the end.
Yeah, it's amazing when you pull back to like a 30,000-foot view over the last 10, 20, 30 years or so, and just sort of how things have shifted. And I think in the last couple of years, how rapidly things seem to have moved. I mean, we've talked on a past segment about Iran sort of crossing the Rubicon into just threatening Israel to firing rockets at them now. And that sort of, I don't know if it's a shark bump or what, but I mean, you see these actions, you see these alliances, just things shifting so quickly now. I think more so than it had probably in the previous few decades, prior to, right? It was pretty, I don't know, maybe a little more stagnant. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm just talking about a general feeling. And it seems like, I don't know, things are moving quickly and shifting quickly right now. And Pastor Mark, I wanted to get your comment too on, we haven't talked since the explosion in Iran. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. I know immediately speculation was flying that this was Israel potentially. No evidence of that as of yet, but people are certainly kind of eyebrow raised given everything that Iran's been doing to Israel.
Yes, anytime anything happens in Iran like that, Israel's always a suspect of that. Israel will probably never say that they did it, and Iran
Right.
probably will never give Israel the credit for doing it because it would humiliate them even further. The leader, the Hamas leader, who was killed in Tehran, in that unbelievable plot by Israel. It wouldn't surprise me if Israel isn't behind that. It was a huge, huge chemical storage area. And of course, chemicals obviously are unstable, and it would be easy for chemicals to somehow be ignited probably and explode. So, the fact that it happened just in some natural way or some kind of carelessness could also explain that. But it wouldn't surprise me at all. Israel obviously has introduced all kinds of viruses into their nuclear program to set that back. They've killed people in Tehran. They've assassinated nuclear scientists there. So, blowing up a chemical storage area would not be anything big for Israel to do. But it was a devastating explosion that took place.
Yeah.
There. And but again, I think those kind of events, even if Israel wasn't behind it, there's a lot of people in Iran that will continue to believe that.
Yeah.
And that rocks the psyche of their nation. Because when you realize, hey, these people can assassinate people in our country, they can introduce viruses into our nuclear program, they can blow up these big chemical storage areas. I think it weakens the psyche of the people there, to believe that wow, Israel can do anything they want to in our own country. And I think it also creates a fear among the leadership there, which I think could also help us right now. President Trump's trying to bring some kind of get back to these nuclear negotiations where Iran won't be able to have nuclear weapons. So, that could also foster that as well for the leadership there if they have fear of what can happen to them.
All right, absolutely. And if you're just joining us now and you're looking for the conversation, the talk on Pakistan and India and the tensions there, just wait until we're done here and you can check it out at the beginning of the video. Spent the first few minutes on that. Another topic here I want to get to, Pastor Mark. We got this, the first patient with ALS to receive a Neurolink brain transplant, now demonstrating his new ability to communicate only with his mind. There's a guy by the name of Bradford Smith. He was the third human to receive this transplant, and he can he went on X and he was saying that he's able to, quote, type with my brain after being rendered largely immobile and nonverbal by ALS. And so it's pretty wild. You see this video here, and they've recreated his voice from past recordings into AI. So when he types and talks, it sounds like him talking. It's crazy. But give me your reaction to this. This is something that's owned, I believe, by Elon Musk, this Neuralink technology. So tell me about why this one caught your eye.
Well, I was watching the news actually just a couple of days ago, and they showed this man, lying there. He's had ALS. He can't move. Obviously, he hasn't been able to talk. And you said that they've cloned his voice. And the program that they talked about how this Neuralink, it's about the size of 5 quarters stacked on top of one another. So you stack 5 quarters is the size it is. They go inside the brain and it's implanted there in the particular area. And then there's these little wires off of this. I mean, it's bizarre to think about this. They take these little wires and they put them into these, specific places in someone's brain. And then the person is able to think. And as they think, they can connect to an electronic device. Like, type out what they're thinking and even speak then, in this cloned voice, what he's thinking. So, this is, I'm not a very smart person in science or technology or computers but I mean, it blew me away. And of course, my first thought was how happy I am for this man. He's not going to live a lot longer. There's no cure for this disease. And so it's a terrible, terrible disease. We all know that it just ravages the body and the muscles and all of that. So, it's wonderful to see that. His family's there. They can hear his voice. They can hear what he's thinking, and his thoughts can be expressed. So first of all, it's wonderful. We have this kind of technology today to allow these kinds of things, but we all know, technology itself is neutral. But, just like the internet or AI or all these things, but they can be quickly turned for, for nefarious purposes or for bad purposes. And, Elon Musk wants this to not just be helping people with paralysis and other things. He sees this as something that's going to become widespread, for people really all over the world to experience. I mean, just read a couple of quotes by him about this whole plan. Elon Musk has said this. He says, if all goes well, there will be hundreds of people with Neuralinks within a few years, maybe tens of thousands within 5 years, millions within 10 years. So obviously, this is looking far beyond people who have ALS or some kind of paralysis. So he has grandiose plans for this. He describes it like this. He says, it's a Fitbit in your skull with all the sensors you'd expect to see in a smart watch. And he goes on and says this, it's a technology that can be used to allow companies to read minds or users to offload their memories. It is not going to happen anytime soon, though the future is wide open. So companies will be able to read people's minds if they have this and offload their memories. Now, again, people say this is not something that's happening anytime soon, but with the way technology keeps exploding and mushrooming, this is they're calling it telepathy. This enables control of your phone or computer and through them almost any device just by thinking. So initial users will be those who've lost the use of their limbs, but then they expect it to go to others. Now, one of the big problems with this is he has such grandiose plans for this that he says so many people are going to be getting this implanted in their brain that there won't be enough neurosurgeons to do it. So they're actually creating a robot called R1
oh my
that's
goodness.
going to be used to implant the device.
I saw Elon posting this over the weekend, something about how robots were going to be doing more of these surgeries. Now, listen, as someone I had open heart surgery myself 5 years ago or so, and there is no way, absolutely no way I'd ever go. It was terrifying enough to go under the knife knowing they were going to do what they were going to do on an open heart surgery. But I trusted the guy there that was doing it. You just can't. I don't know how you can trust a robot in that sort of. Now, even with that technology, I'm sure it's robot assisted, right? They're not just letting the robot. All right, robot's got it. We'll take off. But I mean, that's the point they want to get to at some point. The point you see in movies, and a few reactions as you're going through some of those details. First of all, the immediate, kind of publishing of our thoughts. This seems like a very bad idea. Like I don't know that I want all of my initial thoughts on everything I see just being broadcast. Now, maybe there's a way to gatekeep that or something, but that seems very dangerous. I mean, we see social media now and people are willingly putting their thoughts out on social media. And that's kind of been quite an adventure now to see everyone's thoughts that they want to share. What if we start seeing everybody's thoughts that maybe they don't even want to share? They just go out there. So I don't know exactly how all that works, but as you're hearing that, man, and then, I mean, the danger too, to go in the reverse, right? I'm sure that's what Elon and those sorts of people think. You think about all this AI and this technology we have. Well, if it can read us, well, then couldn't, we read it. So if it's inputting things into your brain, and then like you said, the danger there that we're putting ourselves in to be manipulated is we're already manipulated just by algorithms and things on our screens. Man, the danger there, it seems really real.
Well, yes, because like you said, if it can, if it can download what's in my brain, then can we download it? And I think that's going to be the attraction for many, many people.
Yeah.
Because I mean, think of the access. Think of what people are going to believe from this. I can download all this information into my brain. People will be superhuman with what they know. But when that happens, then everything in their brain and their mind can be downloaded. People will know what they're thinking, all their desires. So I have no idea how technology like this, what's going to be like in the future. But I just know how these things are increasing exponentially now, and with AI, how it's just going to continue to just mushroom. And you think how this can fall into the wrong hands. Obviously, if you go to the kind of the ultimate extreme, the Antichrist, a world leader who controls people's lives, who controls world commerce. You can see how these kinds of things, it's almost like if a lot of people have these, they can almost become like a superhuman with all the knowledge they have. But then it almost becomes like a collective, where everybody can read everybody else's minds. And so, where this will go, how it will be used by someone like the Antichrist, I have no idea. But all these forms of technology that we see today, and AI and quantum computing and all of this, we see how all of this can be used to control people's lives in the future. And that's ultimately what the Antichrist will do. He'll have a global grip on everyone. And this is just kind of another small link here in this chain. It's 3 people now have had this done, but he envisions within 10 years, it'll be millions of people that will have had this. And we all know that if it's going to make you smarter and more successful, people will be lining up by the millions to get it.
For sure. Absolutely. Fascinating stuff as always. Pastor Mark, thanks so much for being here. If you guys want to check out the work that Pastor Mark, Pastor Evans are doing over at endtimes.com, it's always fascinating reads over there. We appreciate you stopping by regularly with us to chat about some of the things that are going on. So Pastor Mark, appreciate it.
Thank you, man. God bless you.
All right. And appreciate you all watching. Make sure you're checking out cbnnews.com to get news from a Christian perspective. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to the Quick Start podcast that is hosted by yours truly here each and every morning. Just a 20-minute or so trip through the news of the day from a Christian perspective. God bless you all. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. All right.